I'm incredibly excited to introduce my sister friend, Miss Jubilee Ransom Mosley, on this episode of Motherhood and Divorce Part 2. Jubilee is a mother, an author, motivational speaker, veteran educator, and soulful recording artist. Girl, I'm so overjoyed you're here to help me to launch Motherhood.
Woo!
Real talk.
Yes, I'm glad to be here.
I would have it no other way. You're part of the reason why I decided to do this.
What?
Your bravery inspired me to live in my truth.
Wow.
I met Jubilee about 10 years ago. You were actually pregnant.
Pregnant!
With your first child.
Yes.
Oh, man, how time flies. He's 10 years old.
10.
Now. 10 years
10 and a grown man.
Oh.
Thinks he's my dad.
Yes.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So excited.
I'm just honored. I really am.
Thank you.
And this is a brilliant idea, and it's going all the way up.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so I was in the very early stages of my educational career when we met.
Yeah.
And you were such a beacon of light. And y'all can see that too with this beautiful smile that just lights up the room. I'm so humbled and incredibly grateful to have you on as my first guest. And I honestly remember every time that you would make a post on your FB timeline,
Yes.
I'll be scurrying to find out what daily information I can find, what daily inspiration I can find to get me through the day. And I'll say this to you, much of what you have lived, survived, and now triumphed over fed my soul.
Wow.
And so I know you'll bless us today with some gems of wisdom. And so I'm going to start with the question that speaks to all of us that are watching today, which is, what does motherhood mean to you?
Motherhood means so many things. It means transformation. Transformation, and the realization of what self-sacrifice really is. I've learned so much through my children, that I don't know that I would have learned through any other relationship, and so they've taught me, right, like how to, and have inspired me to keep on going in moments of challenges. They have taught me the importance of still keeping childlike faith. They have taught me the importance of just having courage and not being blinded by fear, right? And there's so many things that children do, and they just do it. Like, let's jump in the pool, right? If you tell me that now, I have a lot of stuff to do before we jump in the pool. I have to get bobby pins, and I have to pin my hair, and then we have to get 3 of those water caps that still don't work when you put them on. And then I have to go to the side of the pool that's not that deep in order for me to jump in the pool. And then even still, I may not. But for them, it's like, woo, let's go.
Right.
And so that's really been most inspirational to me as it relates to my children. Just those gems of wisdom that I get just by being their mom and seeing their perspective of life from a child perspective, which is take a risk.
Yeah.
Be fearless.
Yeah.
Try it.
Yeah.
Do it. What's the worst that could happen? Without having fear bind them up.
Yeah.
And then in terms of sacrifice, I think any mother would agree, right, that they come first, right? And I think that's not a natural thing. I think I think it's not a natural thing. We get tired, we get weary, and we want somebody to take care of us every now and then. And what do? You still have to make dinner, and you still need to make sure that they're bathed and washed, and you still need to make sure they're going to bed on time and they're up at school, and all of those things continue to need to be done, right? And so it never stops. It's a 27-hour-a-day, responsibility that's extremely rewarding. And so that's what transformation and sacrifice, self-sacrifice.
So much of what you just said really resonates with me. This is the first time that we're asking this question, and this is what this show is really about, because your answer is it's so universal, because that's exactly what I said in my segment when I talked about what motherhood means to me and what it is, and it's this idea around transformation and being selfless, because sometimes you have to suppress what it is that you essentially want to do, or give up that big thing that you were really wanting to do at some point in your life, because it makes more sense,
Absolutely.
for your children. And so much of who you are does change.
Yeah.
And so hearing you say that really, puts the stamp on why all of this matters.
Yeah.
And so, because this show essentially is motherhood and divorce,
Yeah.
I have to now talk about this idea of marriage.
Yeah.
And so we'll merge those two. But what does marriage mean to you?
Yeah. Marriage means partnership. And I don't even want to say ideal. Like, I believe in God's way of marriage, which I think is misunderstood by many. And we hear words like submission and honor and all of that, which I believe in all those things. But I believe that the foundation of marriage is that two people are coming together to complement one another. Two whole people are coming together to complement one another, to do God's will on the earth, to accomplish dreams and visions, and to empower people, right, in their own ways. So as individuals and as a collective union. And so I think marriage is a powerful, powerful thing when it is done in a way that honors God, and when it is not done or used as a control mechanism, because then in that case it becomes stifling, And so I think it's a beautiful thing, and you see the beauty come out when the man, right, the husband is able to push forward, and he is able to have, the things that he aspires to, and he has a woman, a wife that is by his side that helps to birth those things out of him, to call those things out that perhaps he did not see, or perhaps there were things that he suppressed, and it's like, you know what, you can, yes, run for governor, we need, right, build that house or whatever it is, and the wife is cheering on and pouring words of wisdom and life and love into that man, into that husband. And I also believe that the husband should do the same for the wife, right? And that's what I believe. It's a beautiful union where you get stuff done together, stuff that is impactful, where both dreams are accomplished and both parties are responsible for helping to cultivate those and make sure that they actually come to fruition. And then, of course, if you have kids, you throw the kids in there, right? Getting on the same page about how you want to raise them and all that. But it is partnership, lots of communication and just working to be on the same page. And then I believe, submission is a part of it, right? Meaning getting under one mission, right? And so I feel like, yes, I believe the man is the head of the household because he is the covering, right? The protector and the provider and all of that. And so there is a need for submission when it comes to certain decisions, right? But I also believe, right, and I don't want to take you out of church, but there's also...
No, this is exactly why I need you to be here. Y'all seen how I just set up a while ago? I'm learning.
There's a scripture that talks about yielding to one another because, right, a case in point is, right, the husband may say, hey, we need to move to Milwaukee, right? Right? The wife ain't trying to hear it. It's like, girl, I don't want to, who in Milwaukee? I don't nobody want to live in Milwaukee, right? But you pray about it, you get peace about it. It's like, all right, babe, we're going to Milwaukee. Right? Because you're the man in the house and you feel led that is what we should do in this season. I, as the woman, I'm not fighting you on it. If I agree or disagree, I'm going to pray to my God about it and we're going to get together and we're going to move to Milwaukee. But when we get to Milwaukee and we get our brand new mansion, right? The husband says to the wife, what are we going to do with this house? Right? And ask her for her vision. And in that place, the husband submits to the mission and the vision of the wife for the house. Because he's like, child, I don't care if you paint this thing purple, green, yellow, or whatever. Like, that's your department. Do with it what you will, right? And that, to me, that's an example of what that looks like. And it's nobody beating anybody upside the head to do anything because we all are God's creatures and we hear his voice, right? So therefore, there's always this merger. There is this mutual love and respect and honor for one another. And I feel like it's lacking these days in terms of how we view marriage.
Yeah, get your paper and pencil, y'all. Take some of these gems down. Two whole people. Y'all heard that. Two whole people come together.
Right. So the phrase, you complete me, that's just not something I would ever say. Because you shouldn't be completing me at all. If I have any voids in me, then I'm asking, I'm asking God to fill those voids, because that means that I'm coming to you at a deficit. Not that you wouldn't help to exfoliate some areas in my life that are dull, or you wouldn't help, like God wouldn't use you to pour into me and help me to see something that I didn't see in myself. Not that you wouldn't be used in that way. It's not that. But sometimes people look to relationships and marriage to be a fixer and to fill those voids through a person, and that almost never works. I don't really believe that there's longevity in that, because what happens when that person switches up? And so you think you're beautiful, right? You had low self-esteem growing up, and you get with a man or you get with a woman because she is constantly, or he is constantly pouring into you about your looks and how great you are. And then what happens if the person switches up? Do you no longer believe that you're beautiful, that you're powerful, that you're worthy of love? Like there are certain places in us that only God can fill. And the moment that we use people to fill those spaces is where we really start to have an issue over time.
So, I mean, I'm curious. I'm sure the viewers are also curious too, because people just don't come into relationships sort of like knowing what to do.
Child, I didn't know.
Or can just kind of like eloquently speak about all the things we need to do to make sure that relationship is in a place where it can work between two people, because people are coming in with their sort of like, gaps in different areas, right?
For sure.
And so did your upbringing or your roots affect the way that you thought about marriage and partnership? Like, what was your foundation?
Yeah.
Was it after the divorce you learned some of these lessons, or
Yes.
was it before going in?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was 23 when I got married. I didn't really know much about much. I just knew that walking down the aisle, I didn't have any fear. And growing up, I was raised to be a wife, to be like, I was raised to know how to take care of home. I was raised to honor. Like, my dad is one of my superheroes. I love him with all my heart. Yay, dad, right? So there was a period of time where he wasn't there, but then he returned and he married my stepmom. Almost 30 years. They'll be celebrating this fall.
Ooh,
yeah,
exciting.
30 years. So I really grew up seeing healthy marriage, right? I saw my dad transition from alcoholism and drug addiction, and now they're both co-pastoring a church, So I have seen it. I have seen the strength and the stick-to-itiveness a woman needs when, her man is in those spaces without compromising her own worth and her own standards, So that's what I saw growing up, right? And I also was part of a blended family. So then we have my biological mom, right? So they raised us as a triad. And I saw like healthy marriage, how to honor your husband, right? And in that case, it was like my dad, right? So it's like, it wasn't even like what he said was law. It was just like, I respect and honor you so much, as my dad, that I'm going to do, whatever you ask me, because I know that you're never leading me astray or doing anything to harm me. And so when I got married, that just kind of carried on. So much so that I had to learn that in marriage, it wasn't about permissiveness, right, between husband and wife. It was about this whole compromise and conversation, because then I learned that it's like, okay, I was seeing my husband as almost a father figure initially, and it's like, well, no, we have to fix that. So early on, we went to counseling to fix that, and the pastor that we went to was like, right, so it's not permission. It's like we work together. You're not over her, and she's not over you in that sense. But I was young, and so much of what I learned through marriage was because I'm always committed to personal growth and spiritual growth. And I realized that I felt that there was weight that wasn't I didn't feel like my husband was moving and growing, as I was. And so that led to lots of roadblocks, along the way. When I said I walked down the aisle, I didn't have nervousness, is because in my mind, it's like, what can't we win together, right? We love each other. Who knows? We don't know anything, but we love each other. Great. I learned what it was, and this is a great man. He's saved. He loves the Lord. Like, let's tackle the world. Woo!
So different once you get into it, right?
But I will always say it doesn't matter. Like, it will always take two. It takes two willing vessels. And when we stand at the altar and we say I do, or we say I will, that is a continuous I will and I do. That is not just for the date of your marriage. That is for the duration of your marriage forever. You have to continue to say I do, I will, I do, I will. I will learn, I will listen, I will love, I will understand, I will forgive. Those are actions that are always necessary in a marriage. And sometimes you get comfortable, or frustration gets the best of you, and the thing that was like so shiny and sparkly and new, now it's just a ball of resentment, and it goes downhill.
Again, what you just shared feels so much like my story in some sense, because I got married also very young. I was 22.
Yeah.
And what I know of marriage is actually what I see with my parents. My parents are still together. They've been married about 23 years now. And so, but they're very traditional in their roles. And so it worked for them. But still this idea around sort of like growth, right? And feeling sort of like equally yoked within that relationship. For sure. So that the both of you can sort of complement each other. But this idea of sort of like wholeness still, because there becomes resentment in the relationship if one feels like the other one is also outgrowing, one. So I think that oftentimes becomes a roadblock, particularly now for couples in this day and age, because marriage and how it's defined is just very different from what it was when our parents, got hitched.
Yeah.
So that's definitely another conversation around sort of like, marriage. But thank you for sharing that. And so thinking about divorce and it affecting all aspects of your life, because that's what it does. How did it impact you as a mother?
Yeah. So that thing was hard. It's still hard, child. And I don't know if I'll make it through this part without crying, but
Girl. Real talk.
right?
Real talk. Yeah.
So where do I even begin? I felt like oftentimes I was protective, right? But I was also protective of something that no longer existed, right? So like the community that we had in our home, the togetherness, right? Like even when we had our own issues, still collectively, it was like, it's all good. And that's all my sons knew. Yeah. It's all good, right? We get up, we get dressed, we have breakfast, we go to school. Daddy drops us off and he picks us up and he takes us to the park to play football. And, he takes us to the movies and it's good. And we watch movies together and we watch football. And so when everything began, then I was there still trying to uphold this because I didn't want them to know that really there was an axe that just went straight through this vision, and what used to be reality was no longer reality. And so I spent so much time just trying to uphold that for them. And it was so stressful. It was really stressful. And I wasn't ready to share that with them. So that was one piece of the puzzle. So all this stuff is going on. Negative conversations, me packing up and taking them because I didn't feel safe. So I packed my kids up and I went to stay with my parents, slept on the couch for 6 weeks and took them with me. I said, this is crazy. I can't. I was a principal at the time as well when everything just started going downhill. So there were nights I didn't sleep. And there were nights I went into their room and would sleep in the bed next to my son just to get some peace so I wouldn't be harassed that night. And they didn't know any of this. And I'm getting up with my puffy eyes, going to leave the school. And I'm still trying to, yes, everything is great. Everything, yes, absolutely. Until I went back home and I said, let's try this again, right? Because I'm always like, hey, want to do therapy, counseling? It takes two. Like, let's try to, work on this because I honestly do not feel that the reasons that led to, my divorce were insurmountable challenges. I don't. I just feel like there was strong resistance and an unwillingness to want to go through the process it would have taken to heal our marriage. And that is inevitably why it failed, So anyway, so I go back home. I was gone for 6 weeks. I'm like, I can't, like, you're bugging out. It's just too much. And I went back home because I met with someone I trusted, and they were like, try going back home. I'm like, this is okay. All right, but I didn't take my children. I left them with my parents because I still didn't feel like the environment was stable enough for me and them to go back. And I said, all right, let me try. Go home, did a couple of counseling sessions, and then he decided he wasn't going to do it anymore. He didn't want to counsel anymore. I said, well, how are we going to work on our marriage? And then it just went downhill. So my kids never came home. And then because of this downhill motion, right, it was clear that there was separation. And then I had to now have this conversation. And I spoke to, my sissy friend, stylist. She was like, you have to let them know.
You had your real talk moment.
I had a real talk moment, right? And it was my kids, the principal of my kids' school, who was like, have you told them? Because the adults around knew, because I was giving them tidbits of information. And when I spoke to my sissy, she was like, yeah, you're going to have to tell them. There was a period of time where they were visiting with him, and they would come back with different complaints. And I would say, oh, Daddy probably didn't mean to do that, or, just forgive him, stay positive or whatever. And one morning, driving them to school, after I had the conversation, I finally made peace with it. I'm like, how the heck am I going to tell them that, like, we are separated, we're going to go through a divorce? And I was just like, hey guys, mommy and daddy are not together anymore. We're going through a divorce.
I can totally that resonates with me so much. I didn't know how else to have the conversation either when it got to that point. And I feel like it needed to happen. And whenever you try to find all the information about how to best talk to kids about it, but there's just never the right way. Just never the right way. And I think for us, because we're both educators, we know the impact of that. And so we're still within our minds, like, how can I protect them from this, even though it's their new reality, because you don't want this to manifest in different ways. Girl, I'm with you on that.
Child, that was the fastest school drop-off ever.
Oh, my God.
But my son said something to me that affirmed me and confirmed that this is a conversation that was necessary. And at this point, I want to say he's like 8, and he's getting out the car. He was like, oh, it's like, because I didn't know what to believe.
Oh.
And at that moment, I realized that my ex-husband at the time, he was saying a lot of negative things about me to them. And I was, again, upholding, because I'm like, yes, we are going through hard times, we're going through divorce, but I'm not going to badmouth you and all that, because it wasn't all bad. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't all bad. I don't think you're the worst person in the world. Well, that changed now, because you just, child, you need... But, right, I'm not going to put that out there. Like, that is, my position was, that is your dad. You will respect him. If you have an issue with him, then you can come to me about it, and I will address it or have a conversation about it. But you are never to step out of line and be disrespectful. That's your dad. Right. But that is not what he was doing with them. Right. So he was saying all sorts of stuff. And then they were coming home but they weren't saying anything to me because I wasn't mentioning anything.
But they're also smart like that too, because what we think they don't necessarily understand, they do. Oh, this is true. And so they never want there to be any animosity, so they know what to hold, interestingly. Yeah. And not until you start having the conversation, you're like, oh wait, y'all are really processing this, and you're deciphering what I'm gonna say here with mommy, what I'm gonna say here with daddy, because they just trying to, and they're trying to keep the peace.
They are.
They are.
So for sure. So like that was the fastest school drop off. I was like, all right, mommy loves you guys. We'll talk more about it later. And it was harder for me than it was for them. Yeah. But I feel like that did create a release. Yeah. And then we're able to have way more transparent conversations. Like I had to become a more real parent and not like a Mary Poppins mom. Yeah. Right? Because the stuff done hit the fan. Yeah. And we ain't living in, Little Castle anymore. This is not it. Yeah. Right? And so at that point, our mother-son conversations became way more real and way more transparent. Yeah. And for whatever questions that they had, I answered it honestly. And if I wasn't sure, then fine. And that really helped them along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the stance I also have, because I think for moms too, there's always this dual role, right? One, you want to be transparent about what's happening, but there's also a lesson within it. Sure. And when I told my story, I felt like there were times that I had to truly suppress how I truly felt, because I knew they were watching. And then there was this idea of this is still your dad. And so I don't want you to have a negative portrayal of who he is. And then this is also a lesson to you. And so as moms, oftentimes we want our kids to be able to take away, the lesson for when then, because it's almost like training in every aspect of their lives. And I think also going back to who we are as professionals, you're always trying to make sure, you're teetering that line to make sure that they're not impacted in a way that they can't necessarily function the way that you envision for them, even with this trauma happening. Because I remember the conversation I had with my kids, and so my son was 8 and my daughter was 5. And we hadn't necessarily talked about it at all. I mean, they recognized that there was a change because now we lived in 2 separate households, right? And dad will pick you up from school, and then there's the transfer, to mom. And then one day I was just like, well, we're just going to have to, say it. And when I finally said, guys, do you all understand what's happening? And my son was like, yeah. I was like, how do you feel about it? And I to this day, I still haven't, gone through the, all the details of it. And I don't know that that's necessary, but he was just like, yeah. And I was like, how do you feel about it? He's like, I'm good, Mom. We're good. And I was like, you're good? I'm like, Ava, you good? All right. Well, we're good. And that was, and honestly, it also gave me a sense of reprieve because I recognize how resilient children are, and I think if they can see positivity exude, then I think that's the hope that they have. And so that's important for me, despite how I feel, at times, because sometimes you do want to be angry and you want to show your raw emotions, but sometimes you have to suppress that for the greater good, and that can be hard.
Oh, yeah.
Most definitely.
And I feel like I found my safe spaces, and that is what helped as well. So not to say that my children did not experience frustration, because there are times when I yelled more than was good for any human being. It's just like, because it all just comes to a boil, right? And I'm not getting no support from you financially, emotionally, otherwise. As their dad, you're just absent. And that was a big stressor, right? And still is to some degree because he's still not present in their lives, right? But then, packing up and selling my house and not supporting with that. And it's just like me having to use all my savings to pay for the fix up, because you need to fix up before you put it on the market, right? Just stress, lots of stress. And then packing up the house in 3-4 days, turning 13 years of my life into a storage unit in 4 days. Right at the closing table, I went to Wendy Williams.
I saw that.
Hey, girl!
I saw that episode.
Right, I went to Wendy Williams in the morning to do breast cancer survivor, like the eye candy, which was such a great experience. And then right from there, my mother and I went to the sale, the closing, right, to sell my house, my home, our home that we had lived in for 13, 14 years, right? And then from there to my dad's house, right, to a couch, to a bedroom that we share. That all just like that. And so it was stressful. It's like, well, how do I balance this? So I need my safe spaces. I need the space where I can scream and cry into a pillow. And I sat on a therapy couch for this whole process. I'm still going. So I just plop right on that thing.
It took me such a long time to get to that place. I was sort of like wanting to talk about it, wanting to break down about it, because a part of me felt like, one, that made me weak, and two, given the satisfaction that this truly impacted me. And now I'm at a place where I'm comfortable with that because I'm human, right? And so now I feel better about opening up and sharing this. But like I said, part of that came from your bravery and seeing you share your story before I started to go through this. And I went back and I was reflecting on the time that you shared this, and I was like, that's the only way to get sort of freedom and the kind of help that I need to be able to move past it. And then this idea about talking to someone about it. So I thank you, for sharing that, because I think that folks that are watching are definitely taking away, this idea it's okay to seek help, it's okay, to break down and cry when you need to.
Absolutely.
Because that's what's helping you to move through. Let it out.
For sure. Let it go. And be real. Like, that's the thing. I'm big on being real. And I'm not saying, I know people like, you got to keep it 100, keep it a buck. No, it's like, you keep it about 85%. That's about all I'm going to give you. Stop it. Because it's not easy to keep it real. It's not. Because then I have to sit here, and even though you're a trusted source and I don't believe that the information is going to go anywhere or whatever, there's pressure there. There is pressure because you're dealing with perception. Well, what's wrong with her? Look at her marriage falling apart. She can't even do this and that. Well, what's she do? And there was so much of that conversation because I'm a strong, powerful woman. So it had to be Jubilee. Jubilee done messed this thing up. And for me, it wasn't even about blame. And it wasn't about finger pointing. And it was about like, there was a breakdown, you know, and it was fine. It became irreconcilable, but that's what it was. It was never about pointing fingers, right? But in terms of like being real, that takes a lot of bravery and courage to get down to the purest, the most bare form of yourself and be like, honestly, I'm depressed as hell. Honestly, I'm ashamed. Like, honestly. Honestly, I'm dousing a bunch of lavender on my pillow and playing worship music loud as hell so I can fall asleep, and I still don't fall asleep. Yeah. I'm wondering if the rapture's gonna come. I'm getting up and, I don't know, finding a piece of bread with butter it's not a cute space, right? The butterfly is my favorite creature for this very reason, because we love the butterfly. Oh, beautiful. But that metamorphosis is disgusting. It is disgusting. Who has a larva as a pet? Right. No one. No one. Right? A butterfly is coming out of that disgusting looking cocoon. I had a buddy teacher. I said, girl, I'm not doing this. I did it for her when I taught third grade, and I watched the whole metamorphosis with my class. Right. And that's when I learned, and it became my favorite creature from that experience. But when we came back from the weekend and saw them things hatch out of the cocoon, and there was that meconium everywhere, disgusting. And guess what? When we go through traumatic experiences in our lives, such as divorce, it's disgusting. It's disgusting because the process is challenging. It pokes things at you, and it presses things, and it triggers things that you didn't even know existed and may or may not have become existent because of the marriage. You know? And so it's just like the beautiful place for me was knowing that I have a safe space to be naked. And I decided that I wasn't going to take forever to get there because I knew that was a means to an end, and that was the only way that I was really going to be healed. It wasn't going to be by looking at my ex-husband, well, look at what you doing, your dad. No, because even when it's all said and done, it's still all about me and my mental health. And if I'm good, if I'm stable, you know, and if I'm able to raise my kids and live my dream, you know, in a healthy way.
So I think what just happened right here is exactly what this show is all about. Because sitting here just listening to you speak, it feels like therapy for me, because a lot of what you said was exactly what I was feeling. This sense of like shame, right? Yeah. And not recognizing how ugly trauma can be and how messy you have to get and then work yourself through. And it took me some time to be able to get there. And a lot of it was after, you know, I kind of like opened up to my sister circle, and they're like, girl, you gotta work it out. You gotta do the work, you know? And so when I felt like I was vulnerable, I could be vulnerable, that's when I also started to feel this sense of reprieve, you know, now that I don't have to hold this weight anymore, because there are actually people that are here that are willing to help you work through it, because you also can't get through it. And so the help came from you, even though you didn't even know that was happening. The help came from my sister. You know, the help came from my mom. The help came from, you know, other women that are not sitting on this couch. You know, the inspiration in them talking about the fact that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And so, but I think there's also another important piece that you talk about, which is this idea of seeking help, because it is hard to work through all of this by yourself. And so you need to be talking about these things, you know, and having somebody help you to get back to a good space, you know, take care of your mental health. So I thank you for bringing that conversation in this space. Now, there's a lot of folks that are essentially watching this. And so now that you've done all the reflection and you've done the work, what would you have done earlier to help yourself when you recognize that this thing was over?
That's a hard one. When I think back, I'm like, I don't know what else I could have done, right? So my process was, let's have a conversation about it. let's go to therapy about it. Let's go to therapy about it. Let's go to therapy about it. So in hindsight, it probably would have ended earlier because of there was so much trauma, so many traumatic experiences happened because I prolonged it and in looking for the light. But I had so much evidence that there wasn't anymore. But because of tradition, because of fear, because of perception, because of we one little big happy family, I didn't. And I think that even when I said I went back home, like all of that just led to my children now being in a space where now they have to witness the foolishness. You know what I'm saying? Where I felt like, man, you shouldn't have had to see that. You shouldn't have had to hear that. You shouldn't have had to endure that. And that was by my choice because, again, I wanted to try again. And so I guess if anything, it would have been to just be like honest and real, like earlier, even though I don't think anything happens before its time. But there was enough there for me to say, okay, this is it. But I also feel like I needed the bravery and the courage in order to get to that place because I knew that once I got to that place, there'd be no turning back, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, it was more so giving myself the grace to recognize that it's okay,
Yeah.
you know, to be vulnerable. It's okay to, you know, talk about your feelings because for me, and it goes from sort of the professional realm into my personal life, where I'm always managing the emotions of other people that I sometimes suppress my own. And so when you're going through trauma, it's like, nah, I got to still be strong for everybody.
Absolutely.
You know, including the children, because that's always and was my chief concern.
Of course.
But I did not give myself the space to feel,
Yeah.
you know, and to truly sort of like live in that truth. And so that's my biggest lesson, just knowing it's okay.
Yeah.
You know.
I would definitely agree with that. And and listen to your voice. You know, like your voice gets drowned out in these kinds of experiences. I think we as women, we tend to like second guess ourselves with a lot of things. And it's always using someone else's mirror, you know, to see our own reflection, which will never work. Because we carry the weight of what is supposed to be, what is ideal, you know, what looks right, what sounds like, what's proper, what's ladylike, what's appropriate, you know, and it's just like, but what's real and what's true, you know, and what's aligned to my purpose and my destiny? Is this it? And when did it become okay for someone else to call the shots, you know, in my own life and in my own experience? And when did it become okay for me to be silenced about it? Like, when did that become okay? That someone else had more of a range and a say-so over where I should be and who I should become, you know?
So thinking about our sister circle, what piece of advice do you have for other women who are now experiencing motherhood and divorce?
Yeah. Find your safe space, you know, pray about it, but really find it because it's not a journey that you really should go through alone at all. And let's get really clear on what strength is. Strength is vulnerability, and vulnerability is strength. You know, and so the moment that we're going to eat, you know, a can of spinach and have Popeye arms and go through, it's like eventually you will crash and burn. Eventually, because we're not built to continue to harbor all these things in and to continue to say, I'm all right, I'm all right, I'm all right, when really you're not. And so I think it's really about identifying, even if it's just one person, which I think overall as women, we just need to be better at that for one another. And I understand when people do not share and when people do not reach out, I understand that they probably feel like they're going to be judged because a lot of times it's hard to find a safe space, right? Or to find people who won't judge you for what you're going through and just sort of sit with a listening ear and be like, it's okay, right? I'm not your judge. That your experience is your experience and it is where you are right now, right? And I feel like as women, we could be way better with that. And instead of, you know, having our own sort of views that we're imposing on others, just shut up. and just listen. Like, right? Because we all have something that we are ashamed of. We all have something in the closet that we don't want nobody finding out about, right? If we could be honest. And so I feel like as women, that's another piece. But in terms of women going through divorce and motherhood, I think it's important for you to find your safe space, be able to identify who that person is. If it is a therapist, if it is a close friend, and if you feel like you have nobody, get a journal or start talking into voice memos. I am frustrated, and you, right, like, figure out what that is. And for me, that was like a really big moment. Before, like, I always have my sissy, you know, who I speak to, and she really has been an integral part of like my healing process.
Sisters,
right? Like, it's just a beautiful thing. They're God sent, right? But the other piece of that was me getting to a place where I said, okay, who else? Who else is trustworthy enough who can help to carry me through this season? Because I knew that there were many days that I needed to be carried. I needed to be carried, you know? The books I'm listening to, my journaling, I threw it all in there because I knew that I was on that journey to healing.
And so there was one thing that Jubilee said that I want to stamp for our sister circle, which is this idea around getting clear about what strength is. And so this idea around strength is vulnerability and vulnerability is strength. I think that's incredibly powerful because I think oftentimes when people think of being strong or, you know, what strength means, it's to never show, you know, their innermost naked self. And sometimes that's what you need to do to get to where you need to get to.
Yeah.
So I thank you for that gem of wisdom.
Absolutely.
This was really, really good.
Yes, it was.
Yes. Joining us now is Miss Lori Scott. Hi. I am doing so good, and I'm also incredibly excited to have you on the MRT couch with us today. And so Lori Scott is a mother, a licensed psychotherapist, as well as a certified relationship and transformation coach. She also experienced motherhood and divorce herself. And so, Laura, we have lots of questions for you, and I think that you're going to help a lot of women get to the point of understanding that their mental health is important. And that got to be a part of our conversation as Jubilee and I were talking about. And what's transformational for me is that, again, this idea about power of connection and how we experience things. Because this is literally the first time Jubilee and I are sitting on this couch and talking about this. But so much of what she's saying is resonating with me because this is the experience. Right. And so you're sort of going to shed some light on what that looks like for other women that you've worked with. And hopefully we can help somebody watching today. And so I always start with this question because I think it's the point of connection for us. But what does motherhood mean to you?
Wow. So motherhood means inspiration to me. Like, you're inspiring your children and you're giving them a little bit of who you are, right? So your life experiences, how you grew up, you're giving that to your children. So I think motherhood represents that to me. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And so, Lori, what brought you to this work?
Wow. So what brought me to this work is the fact that I needed my own therapy, right? So I didn't really like being a teacher, but I did it because I needed to make some money. And I got connected with the students. So the students, they just adored me. And I was working at a school for troubled boys. And every 6 weeks, the parents would have to come. We have to provide counseling, right? And so, you know, so I told the parents, you know, what was going on with the students. And every time they would come, they felt more and more connected to me. And they were like, wow, you would make a great counselor. And at the time I was like, okay, so I'm a teacher, but I didn't think about being a counselor, right? And I noticed that the kids would connect to me, but I wasn't thinking about it like that, right? So I just decided to be a counselor. I went to school for it a little while. And in that first year, I started going through my own a situation where my marriage was falling apart, and didn't see it coming. And I had to stop. I had to stop school. It was rough. My children were young. I had an 8-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. Wow. And I thought to myself, damn, like I never thought I was going to go through a divorce. And I hear these parents saying, oh, you'll be a great teacher. I mean, a counselor. But I needed counseling at that time because I'm about to go through a divorce, and I'm thinking, how am I going to be a single mom with 3 kids? Yeah. And I had to leave where I was because it was School for Troubled Boys. It was on campus, so I have 2 girls and a boy. I wasn't going to have anybody touching my babies, so I had to leave where I was, went home, and had to start all over again. I had to put the counseling on hold, the schooling, and I was just like, this is rough. This is rough. And after a few years, I was able to pick it back up again. I decided to go back to school because it was just a traumatic experience for me. Being a single mom, trying to work through the issues and back and forth with the ex, and he was not really a nice person. He was really kind of nasty. And well, of course, divorce is nasty, right?
Yeah, it gets ugly.
And but being able to go back to get my master's in counseling, while I was thinking, I'm hearing the parents in my ear like, oh, you'll be a great counselor. I was like, I think going to school is going to help me with being a mom, to be a mom, a single mother, right? And I decided to, to really do it, and it took a while. It took longer than I anticipated because I was working full time. I was a single mom and then trying to get through school, but it worked out. It really worked out because there's so many things that I learned about myself. I didn't realize that I had some issues. Like I blamed him for a lot of shit. And, but it was really me. I had to do some stuff. I had to work on me. I had to decide how to deal with my children in a real way, how to help them understand, like what is happening with mom. I realized before, the divorce was happening that it was inevitable. It's going to happen because I saw how we were fighting and I said, this is too much for them. This is abuse because arguing and fighting, you think it's okay in a sense because y'all just dealing with certain issues, but the children see this. And so, so anyway, going through that, I decided, to continue, and that's where I am today. And yeah.
That's a powerful story, and thank you for sharing that because just hearing you share that, I'm pretty sure someone else is resonating with your story because sometimes our passion and drive comes from the things that we do experience, and so I'm pretty sure even having that experience helps you to even be a better therapist because you can truly connect, with your clients. And so statistically, 50% of all marriages end in divorce. And so how does one start the healing process when going through something as traumatic as divorce? I think for me, I tried to help myself get through it and recognize like that was not going to work, and then I looked to, other women that have been through it and try to get some gems and wisdom from them. But from your professional stance and seeing other women, like what is the starting point for that process?
I think it's grieving. Allow yourself to grieve because divorce is a loss. It's a death, right? And it's coming to terms with that. But sometimes you came to terms with it before the divorce even took place. You just didn't want it to, right? With a lot of things that you thought, okay, well, I don't want anybody to see what's really going on, or all the thoughts that you thought relationships were about. So I think the first part is really deciding to grieve. It's okay to cry about it. It's okay to let it go, in your own space, in your own time. Yeah. Take that time to grieve and sit with yourself. Yeah.
That's the grace you give yourselves. And oftentimes as mothers, we don't know how to do that. give ourselves the grace to do that.
Yeah.
And so, what is the number one challenge women face when going through the process of healing, and then how do we combat that? I feel like it kind of connects to this idea of grace, but is there anything that we can kind of like stamp to say, here's the thing I've noticed over time with, my clients when they come in, and then what is then the advice for them to be able to combat that hurdle?
It's a few challenges, right? So, and it just depends on the type of divorce, right, that you're dealing with. You got some people who have children. You have other people who are it's just them two, right? And so one challenge when you got children, when you have children, is, take some time for your own self. You're caring for more than one person, right? And so you can get lost in caring for other people. You can get lost in trying to make sure this is okay, or that's okay. Or you get lost in, like, say if it's the couple without the children, you get lost in appearances, right? You want marriage to be a certain way, so you had that persona of, oh, our marriage was good. So you think, okay, I got to keep up that image. And I'm saying, don't do that. Just be honest with yourself, and I think how to combat that is just have, some real talk with yourself. Take some time to, when you're trying to care for everybody else, recognize that you are a self too.
Yeah.
And you got to take care of you too.
Yes.
And then say if it's just a couple, just recognize that other people go through stuff too. Yeah. And it's not just you, you're not alone. Right.
I think it's absolutely that, because that's exactly what I got to when I talked about my experience, which is this idea. One is that you're not alone. And I think, again, that's a part of why I think this sisterhood is incredibly important. But then going back to, it's okay to also give yourself the space to take care of what you need. Because I think oftentimes, again, when there are kids involved, that you feel that your primary obligation is to make sure they're okay. But if you're not okay,
if you're not okay,
then it's hard for you to make it okay for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so thank you for that. Another piece of wisdom, gems today, lots of gems. Write them down, y'all, write them down. So most often, folks don't seek help when they're experiencing anything traumatic, especially when there's shame and when there's fear of being perceived as being weak. And so what advice would you give to women when it gets to the point of recognizing, I can't make it through this? I just don't want to get up. Like, what advice would you give to that woman that's watching right now, that's going through something and is afraid to then seek the help she needs because of this perception of being weak, or there's this shame that, is just overshadowing this ask?
I would say they really need to get therapy. I think that's the biggest thing, because a lot of times I think we as, many cultures kind of foo-foo, getting help. But I think help is so needed. And not necessarily getting help from family, because seeking help is important. Seeking help is important. Google a therapist. Take the time to look through them, call them, do a consultation if you need to. Ask them some questions, because you can't do this alone. If we're living inside our heads, we think certain thoughts, and especially from the standpoint of shame, right? We start talking about certain things, how we're feeling, and when we're doing that, we fall deeper and deeper into this hole, and getting help pulls you out of it. Sometimes family members, when you get support from them, they're gonna, oh, you're all right, or you're okay, and they're trying to make you feel a certain way that you're not. But the therapist brings out a different perspective. So I think it would be good to seek help first, and be okay with it. And it's not a bad thing to do that. Yeah.
Be okay with that. So there's a lot of information that was shared here today, and so many gems that we can all walk away with. If there's one thing that you can stamp for our audience today, what is that one takeaway you would want for folks to walk away with that they can absolutely apply real time as it relates to the trauma of divorce and healing?
One step, one takeaway. I think a good takeaway is just to recognize that you're okay. Like, you would think that all is, lost and whatever, but divorce has many different faces, right? And divorce, we can rename it. We can reframe that. It doesn't have to be lost. All like your life is over. It's not. It actually could turn out to be a blessing. Something that you can learn from. And you can grow.
Yeah.
So I would say a takeaway would be that you're gonna be all right. That you're gonna be okay, and that you can make it.
Yeah.
And that while it feels like midnight, or if it feels like it's, a horrible place in your life, you're going to learn, and you're going to make it from the base.
Yeah. That landed for me. I hope y'all felt that. Yeah. You're going to make it. That landed for me. Yeah. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. Lots of good stuff on the MRT couch. And so there was a lot of good learning here today from our MRT guests. And so I want to leave you all with this gem from a review that I read some time ago that stuck with me. Whether your heart and soul are troubled or overflowing with joy, nothing satisfies quite like chatting things over with another woman. So regardless of the path our lives take, all women are sisters. We speak a common language and we share a universal bond. Thank you all for tuning in to part 2 of our 2-part series on motherhood and divorce.